Yeah, I was hunting I saw this bull on like the 7th or 8th. I actually glassed him up from a different vantage point. And so I biked into a zone early and got on that bull the first day, followed him around a little bit, played it pretty safe. And then once I saw him or laid eyes on him, I was like, no other elk matters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the bull. If I'm going to kill him or nothing.
Yeah.
And I've never done that before, really. I've always shot the first bull that I could because it's archery hunting and you should. But I was okay with that, the potential outcome of that. And gosh, that's a fun game to play.
Yeah.
I really learned a lot from just hunting one bull. Like, you know what he sounds like, you know what he's going to do. You can kind of read him, but then he slips you.
Yeah.
You know, again and again and again.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. Four years ago, I bought a new truck for the first time ever, and I was so excited. It was incredible. It smelled good. It felt good. I wasn't constantly afraid of breaking down, It was awesome. But after I drove it for a couple weeks, I do the same thing that I always do, and the back seat started to fill up with stuff. I'm guiding elk hunters and deer hunters, and I'm duck hunting, and I'm fly fishing, and all that gear just accumulates. And pretty soon, I wasn't able to take people with me anymore, and I was embarrassed. People would ask for a ride, and like, nah, sorry, man, I've got too much stuff with me. But I couldn't put it in the bed because then it gets damaged by weather. So I go to the internet, and I'm looking for options, and I ended up buying a deck-to-drawer system. Now, this was a big purchase for me, but it's something that I felt like I needed, and it looked like it was going to be a good product, and it really was. Decked came out with a new drawer system this year, and they've made some meaningful improvements over the previous one. You have almost no wasted space in your truck bed now, so you can access the sides of the drawers, and then the drawers roll a full 18 inches farther out, so you can actually access the back of the drawer even if you don't have a lot of arm reach. There's some really strong tie-down points on top that have a 400-pound load rating, so if you're going to haul something like a motorcycle or big coolers or whatever, you can really strap your gear down and make it secure. You can lock these drawer systems, so you can lock the drawers, or if your tailgate locks, then nobody can access the drawers anyways. So I actually feel like my stuff is more secure inside this drawer system than in the cab of my truck. That's a big deal to me. The complete deck system is made in America by Americans, and that's something that I love and appreciate. They've got one that will fit in any truck or van that's been made in America in the last 20 years plus. You can go to decked.com/sixranch and get free shipping. But just being honest with you, they get free shipping to everybody. I also, while you're there, want you to check out their deco line. So they've got a bunch of different boxes and storage containers that either fit on top of or inside of the drawer system, and those are built really robust. I saw the prototypes at an event this summer. I'm impressed. I'm excited to get my hands on them. I haven't yet, but the prototypes were super badass, and the ones that are in production model, they're available now over at decked.com. So even if you just need a place for some tools, or you need a new bow case, or something along those lines, go check that out. And if you're driving around right now and your back seat is just full of gear and you can't haul people around, maybe you should consider looking at the full deck drawer system, because it's a good piece of gear. It was a good purchase for me, and I hope it helps you. In the United States, there are about 15.2 million hunters. That's how many hunting licenses we sell in the country. And they spend around $21 billion per year, which breaks down to an average of $2,800 per hunter. Now, we need to be really smart about how we spend that money. You can't spend it on stuff that's going to break. Otherwise, you have to buy something else again, and you end up costing yourself even more. We also need to be smart about how much weight we carry in our packs, because that's a serious limiting factor. One way to remove about 5 pounds out of your pack without sacrificing your ability to find animals is to get rid of your spotting scope and tripod. Now, there's a time and a place for those things, and I carry both of them a lot. But if I need to go lightweight, I'm going to carry stabilized binoculars. And the best stabilized binoculars I have ever used are from Sig Sauer. They are the Zulu 6, and they just came out with a new pair called the Zulu 6 HDX. I use the 12 power magnification model. They weigh 21.5 ounces. And they have 2 modes of stabilization. So you throw the lever forward once, and that's going to stabilize the image. If you turn it off and turn it back on again, that's going to stabilize it even more. And I'm not kidding. It is more stable than if you're glassing from a tripod. It is absolutely incredible. You're going to be able to see stuff at just incredible distances and really break it down. Like, you're going to be able to tell the difference between a Billy and a Nanny mountain goat at a mile. You're going to be able to actually see if there's a kicker coming off that 4x4 muley that just popped up over the hill. They work great at early and last light. They work great at highlight. They fit really well in my hands. Like, this was one of the first products that I asked Sig to make when I started working with them. And to no surprise, they were already on it. They were way ahead of me. But this is a really good piece of gear. I highly encourage you look into it. You can go to sigsauer.com, look for the Zulu 6 HDX. Comes in a few different magnification settings, but the one that I like the best is the 12 power. Check it out. So what's the Texas way?
The Texas way, man, you just show up, and guys like Colton Moore and others who run Perennial Outfitting, they just have the gun ready to go, right?
Yeah.
And it was a weird thing, right, at first, because you're spending all your time dialing in. But I think that the funny thing about traveling with guns sometimes is, elevation changes and ballistics change a little bit, and I don't know how true that is, but it's nice to show up and be like, this gun is for this place.
Yep.
And it is 300 days a year for this place.
And while it's vulnerable, admittedly, because I've been in this situation too, where I've had to show up and shoot somebody else's rifle, it feels really vulnerable to me to do that. But if you're being guided, it's probably more important that your guide knows the rifle than that you know the rifle.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in the case of like follow-up shots and, what is it dialed? What are you dialing to 354 yards versus 400,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your guide is going to know that cartridge, that rifle, all of that stuff really well. So he's not trying to do math or she's not trying to do math and try and learn, a 6mm super SWAT or whatever, new cartridge. It's like, no, this is my 28 Nosler. I've shot this thing a million times. Like, I know this rifle inside and out, and I'm going to be able to spit all the data at you like as fast as it's occurring. Now, it's your job to be able to adapt to that new gun. You need to know how to be safe with it,
right?
How to operate the safety, how to load, unload, how to adjust the scope for parallax and zoom, basic stuff. But that's not that hard.
No, that's like the show up at the halfway mark in a day, first day, and then that afternoon is spent learning that weapon.
I have a bad habit where I put a lot of cheek pressure on the gun, and I tend to bury my eye low in the scope, and I don't have full sight picture. I have very consistent sight picture, but if somebody else sights in a rifle and it's zeroed perfectly for them, chances are it's not going to be perfect for me. And I think that that's really normal person to person. So yeah, you do need to shoot that guide's rifle when you get there and make sure that it's zeroed for you. But man, it's going to be like within an MOA. So a couple clicks and you're in business.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is a good ways to go. In the opportunities I had with working as an ambassador for SIG, I was often dealing with guns that were like so brand new that they were like, it would almost be overselling it to call them prototypes. Like they still had a lot of 3D printed parts. Mm-hmm. They were a long ways away from what would, be a production rifle. And sometimes like one time I went on a hunt where I'd been sent the rifle beforehand, but I hadn't been sent any ammo. So like I showed up to go on this really tough mountain hunt, and we went to the range, and most of these guys just like zeroed their rifles and were ready to roll. Like I needed to learn this gun. I wasn't being guided. I was going to be all on my own. I needed to shoot this thing, and there just wasn't ammo available. It was a concept at that point. And another time was when I went mountain goat hunting in Kodiak. We had the very first prototypes of what would later become the X10. It didn't even have a name yet, and those had 3D printed grips that were slicker than a fish, buddy. And I don't know if you know this, but it rains in Alaska.
Yeah, it sure
sometimes
does.
on Kodiak it rains there too.
Couple days a year.
So we're like wrapping tape on these things.
Yeah, like a hockey stick.
They had the wrong sights on them, so you couldn't. If you used the sights, you couldn't hit anything at 10 yards. And I think people from the outside in look at some of this stuff and think, man, it's so cool, and it is.
Yeah.
Like it's the life that I love and want. But also sometimes you're on Kodiak Island with a conceptual pistol that doesn't work all that well.
Basically a stick bow at that point.
Yeah.
Instinctual pistol shooting.
It's kind of funny.
Oh, man.
How was guiding quail this morning?
It was great.
Yeah?
There's some about, I don't know if it's that I'm getting a little older or whatever, but watching like pointing dogs, I feel like I'm in a magazine every time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a almost 3-year-old Llewellyn setter from Cash Setters, and he's out of Iowa. And this dog, man, is a special thing. She's awesome.
And Cash Setters is a pretty well-known kennel.
Yeah, I would say it's a selective kennel, right? So Chewy does like 3-ish, 4-ish litters a year, maybe.
Yeah.
So there's a pretty long waiting list. I've become really good friends with him, and he's the kind of guy though. When I was looking for a breeder to go with, he was the guy who was like, throw away the books, don't look on the internet, talk to me about the training process, right? Because I never trained a pointing dog before.
Sure.
So you really, because he doesn't have that many dogs out in the world every year, he forms really close connections with his clients and with his dogs, right? So she's just been an absolute great dog to learn from, and we've been able to chase all kinds of species of upland birds. It sort of changed my season. I was like a hardcore waterfowl guy through the winter, right? Yep. And now I think I'm a weekday waterfowl hunter, and then weekends I'm in the hills chasing chuckers.
Yeah. Well, that's good because that gives me weekends to sleep in.
Yeah, exactly. We got to find ourselves like a sure enough gentlemanly chucker hunt that involves side by sides and a quarter-mile walk on sort of flattish ground.
Not worried about falling off of a cliff.
Yeah. I do my dog loves to be. She's like a percher.
Okay.
She likes to get up on the precipice of something.
Yep.
And look over. And one time when she was little, she just looked down and just jumped. Right? Probably like a 12-foot jump. And then she kind of looked at me and was like, that was dumb.
Yep.
But now it's like her toenails are like over the edge, and she knows exactly how far it scares the shit out of me.
The first bird hunt I ever took Claire on was, let's see, it was September 1st, opening day of grouse.
Mm-hmm.
She was born December 12th the previous year.
Yep.
So she's just over 9 months old at that point. And I wanted to hunt her bad. We'd worked all summer long, all spring, like we'd worked really hard, and she was doing well. And I was like, well, let's go see. It's such a memorable hunt for me.
It is. Yeah.
And I think that the first hunt you get with a dog, especially a puppy that you trained, is incredibly memorable. But we hiked down this ridge looking for grouse, came back up a draw, and suddenly she turned and looked at this brush pile and started growling. This little 9-month-old lab puppy. She's growling like there's a T-Rex in there.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for a bear or a lion. Like she definitely winded something, and she's just like, and I was like, all right, Claire, there's nothing there. Yeah.
Yeah.
A for aggression, but there's nothing there.
Young nose.
And I go and, give this brush pile like a little kick, and some grouse flush out of it. And I wasn't ready. So we go find them again, and I shot a couple of them. One of them goes off over this rim, and she did the same thing, man. She runs up the edge of this thing, and I just remember seeing her like Superman off of this cliff, all 4 legs out. I was like, oh my God, I just killed my dog.
Yeah.
And she came back with a grouse and is coughing up feathers. It's like, we went on our very first hunt and we got birds, and she brought them back and did the whole thing, and like just so amazing.
Yeah, it changes your perspective, I think, on what it means to like hunt individually. I just don't think you get that with hunting with another human because they just don't have like any sort of quit.
Yeah.
Right. Sky is like one of those dogs too, though. She is like a human in that she'll have off days, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, what is going on? But we do too. So I try to be patient with that, right? Where it's like, I shot like hell last weekend.
Yeah.
She's looking at me like, you're crazy. What are we doing? And then the next day she's blowing birds and the wind was weird. It was just like a strange day. So I've been learning a lot about like taking it in bigger chunks, different strides that way of trying to learn with her a little bit. But overall, man, it's been such a fun thing.
If I'm having a bad day, my dogs act poorly as well.
Yeah.
Which makes it worse, right?
Yeah. Double whammy.
Yeah. So it just kind of spirals. So that's something that I check in on with myself now is if my dog's not acting right, I need to look inside and have that introspection, be like, okay, how am I living right now? What do I need to change about my attitude? And that seems to be the best way to fix my dog's behavior is actually to fix my own.
Yeah, they're so keyed into your emotion.
Yeah.
Like that day I was late getting out the door, rushing to the spot, and then she acted rush the whole day. It's like, well, no wonder.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the quail hunt was great, though. She is a big running dog.
Mm-hmm. Llewellyns are.
Yeah, and, typically when people think about setters, they think of grouse dogs, mostly, seemingly, at least in the Midwest. And out here, there's some people don't choose not to run them for chuckers because they don't really have big of an engine as like a GSP or any of the bigger German breeds. But she covers a lot of ground, and I like seeing her get a longer day in the quail woods or in the grouse woods because I think she sort of adapts as she goes. She like gets the scaries out a little bit and then hunts them. Like today, she hunted a ridge top, really well with the guys down below because it just wasn't working in the tight quarter stuff.
Yep.
So her ability to adapt has been really awesome to watch.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yep.
It's a scary thing to guide with your dog.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I was a little bit worried about that just because generally I don't bring anybody hunting with me, bird hunting with my dog when it's like their first time with a shotgun, especially in chucker country. It's just you're never fully planted on the ground.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
If you got 1 foot solid, you're doing pretty good.
Right.
And that just bodes poorly, if the dog makes a mistake and jumps after a flushing covey or, you're in the thick stuff and they shoot into a bush, that can be pretty horrific outcomes.
Well, as per usual, we don't name names when we're talking about clients, but what gentlemen these guys are.
Oh, just phenomenal people.
Yeah.
Like, they get out of the truck and it's like, they never once talk about themselves, right? They want to know about you, your dog, how the day's going. I found them to be very present too, which is sweet. Like, this is what we're doing now. And oftentimes with clients who get to go around and do all this cool stuff all over, it's like they're always thinking of the next thing. Yeah. These guys were keyed in, didn't want to quit, which I like. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
I've had the pleasure of hunting with them a few different times in a few different locations, and I really, really enjoy these guys.
Yeah,
and we're stepping into a bull hunt tomorrow. It's opening day. Got off the rifle range today, and they're going to be shooting that custom prototype, Model 21 Nosler. And the only thing that's really prototype about it, honestly, is the stock. It's got a Manor stock on it that is different from what they've put on most of their Model 21s. Really sweet shooting gun. Both of them made the longest shots they've ever made before, which has become like one of my favorite things to do, especially with this rifle. As soon as I get guys zeroed at the range, I like to ask them, what's the farthest shot you've ever taken?
Right.
And then we'll shoot something that's farther than that.
Yeah.
And it's just like opening up the world.
Right.
And long distance shooting is not the thing that I enjoy about hunting. Like I want those animals to be as close as possible. Like if they have powder burns on them, that's ideal.
Yeah. But
it's so fun to shoot where you're not going to hear the sound of your impact for 3 seconds after you pull the trigger. Like that's really fun.
That is really fun. And I think the other thing that's interesting about that situation is it just, it makes those closer shots seem closer.
Yeah.
Right. Very simply.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. And you can learn a lot too.
Yep.
And I think learning about wind at yardage and all the things that come with long distance shooting, that's a really important skill set. And we're lucky to have a place around here we can do that.
Yeah.
That's pretty rare.
We have an incredible range here.
It is an incredible spot.
Yeah. Being able to shoot out to 1,000 yards really comfortably work all the ranges in between,
Yep.
static steel targets that are constantly out there. You bring your own paper and sight
Yep.
in at 100 and then go from there. It's really fun.
Yeah, that's
It's a great place to learn. And I'm very grateful for having that opportunity. And, it's run by volunteers, which is classic of this area.
Yeah, so true. It's just like true grit and positive vibes, as the kids are saying, with the whole crew out there. It's always pretty cool to see.
Okay, serious question time.
Yeah.
Within the scope of the outdoor space, like people who enjoy the outdoors, what would you consider to be the traits of a gentleman? Because we joke about this from time to time. We say, oh, that's a gentlemanly hunt, or, we can also be more serious and talk about these guys and these guys are gentlemen. Like these are gentleman hunters. What would you consider to be the traits of a gentleman?
That's a great question. I think first and foremost, it's somebody who is concerned about those around them more than themselves. Mm-hmm. They're probably the last guy to take the shotgun off the rack in the duck blind. They're the ones paying for breakfast and asking how you are.
Yep.
I think when it comes to like the specifics of hunting, it's generally, I find the gentlemanly type to be probably a little more experienced because they want to share that experience with other people. Versus like, I'm sure that the father of this duo right tomorrow is his son's going to be up first, right? Yeah. And it goes different ways. Like other people would not do that because it's like a short amount of time, whatever else. But I really think it's very simply they just put other people before themselves.
Yep.
And there's no panic, right? I think the gentleman understands that there will be more opportunities for him at some point, and that's sort of back of brain the whole time. And they carry that hunt to hunt, it seems like.
Yeah.
I think just putting other people before themselves.
Politeness.
And the last thing I'll say, too, is that they just do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
When presented with an ethical dilemma, they 100% of the time take the high road.
Yep.
No questions asked.
I would agree with all of that a high ethical standard and moral standard and moral compass are traits of a gentleman, for sure. I like that. I think that's something that we can all strive to be and improve upon as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think certainly like the panic phase of a hunt where you're like, okay, we're going to get this done. The slowdown of that moment, the visualization of it's like quite literally slowing down is something I aspire to. And most of these folks have that.
Yeah. Where
they're able to kind of take a step back, let the situation sort of unfold in front of them. There's no panic.
Yeah.
That's a pretty special trait.
That cow elk hunt that I guided a week and a half ago, the last day was the last day. Like it was like very much go time. And that hunt was interesting. I would love to be able to observe that third person, because there was a lot of times that we were sprinting. And then there was a lot of times that we were moving so slow. And I think learning how to move that dial is something that comes with the experience. And I'm not saying that I got it all right. I will say that we got an elk at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it required everything. It required times that we were going very fast, and it required times that we were going very, very slow, and times that we were completely stopped and being patient. And ultimately it worked out. And that was really fun. It was such a dynamic hunt.
Right.
It was really cool.
Yeah, I'm always impressed by the people that know exactly how to act in a certain situation. Like I hunt with a couple guys that will sit on a ridge for 12 hours if that's what it takes, but they'll also sprint through the timber if they need to.
Yeah.
Right. Or they'll still hunt a step at a time for an hour and a half. That to me is a great skill set.
Yeah.
Like understanding the situation at hand and then applying the tactic to be successful.
Yep. And it's exciting.
It is, man.
Yeah.
It really is. But there's nothing like sprint through the timber, man. I love it.
So what we were going to talk about previously, our last show we did, we talked about the skills that people should develop prior to hunting season. This time, I think we should talk about reflecting on archery season, and we can talk about deer, we can talk about elk, but the reflection phase is really important. It's critical for learning, and you'll find in organizations that deal with emergencies and tragedies that they something that they have in common is an after action review.
The AAR.
Yep. So what was the plan? What actually happened? What can we do better next time? So much learning occurs throughout that and just talking it through. And if you don't do that with yourself, then you've really missed an opportunity to learn from your successes and failures. So talk me through your archery season a little bit.
Yeah, sure. The first thing I'll lead with, and this is just something that I started doing a couple years ago, and I switched from doing this in a written form to on my phone because they're always with me, is I keep a log of every day of archery season.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, and specifically for elk, because I think you get so tired towards the end of it that you need that information to learn from.
I wish I had been doing that.
And it's very simple. What I do is the time I left the house, what happened that day, and that's about it. Right?
That's nice.
The reason I do the time I left the house is because when we're hunting these local units, I need to know next year at that date and that time, what is the actual time to get to my hunting zone if you're not camped out there. Yep. And that is invaluable information because then you're not sitting there at 11 at night trying to do backwards math with the sunrise and all the things, right?
Dude, and at night, I will set my alarm for, an hour before I have to leave.
Yep.
Or 45 minutes before I have to leave. And I'll think about what needs to get done in the morning, how much time it's going to take, give myself a little margin for error for things going wrong, and then adjust off that. Then when I wake up in the morning, my mindset has shifted dramatically. Mm-hmm. And suddenly I think, you know what? I can get all that done in 15 minutes instead of 45 minutes. Yeah. And I'll hit the snooze button a couple times, and then I'll forget something. And I need to be more diligent about all that. I despise being late. I cannot handle being late. And, on one side of that is inconveniencing other people. On the other side is missing out on opportunities. Yeah. And if you're showing up 15 minutes after legal shooting light, you lost.
Yeah. I think in that situation, it's better to take an off day.
Yeah.
And not even go in there half-assed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe rest up. You probably need it.
That's the second point I was going to make is throughout a 30-day archery season, if you're lucky enough to hunt a lot of that, you got to take the off day. Yeah. You have to do it. And I pick a weekend day typically when it's busiest.
So I hunted the entire season this year, which I've never done before. And when I say the entire season, I mean that I was there for days before the season and then 2 hunts a day for the whole Marianne.
Yeah. And we're not talking 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. This is 3 a.m. to 11, 12, 1 in the morning.
Yep. I worked over 500 hours in September.
Insane. People be going to Tahiti on that overtime if you're a firefighter.
Yeah. It's crazy. I had a lot of mental fatigue and, made a lot of mistakes as I went along because I was so tired. And by the end of the season, I was having to sleep quite a bit during the day just to remain functional.
Yep.
And it took a solid 3 weeks just to start to feel normal again afterwards.
There's that old wives' tale, right, where it takes 2 days of good sleep to make up for a shitty one.
Yeah.
I think it's more for me as I get a little older,
Yeah, I mean, the scientists say that you can never make it up.
Yeah, it's just cutting years, but it's worth it. I think it's worth it for September. Yeah.
Yeah. If I wasn't guiding, I would hunt it very differently. Mm-hmm. But part of guiding is putting on a show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And creating an experience where people can interact with those animals. They can try to accomplish their own goals. And you have to set all that up in a way that is the ultimate for that individual. Mm-hmm. And you're constantly tailoring it and amending that plan all the time. And fatigue is definitely a factor. And at what point are you doing the job, and at what point are you doing a disservice to the people that you're trying to help hunt? Because you're not at 100%. You might not be at 50%.
Yeah, likely not.
Yeah,
especially as the season wears on, right? Yeah. I think, James, the things that were interesting about this season is, at least over here, we had a pretty inconsistent season. And what I mean by that is like it wasn't like it started on this day and then it carried and grew throughout that. It was very like, that was a great day. This was a shitty day.
Yeah.
This is 2 great days. These are 4 crappy days.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was just a strange occurrence. And so what I took away from that is like, what I found is like the consistency of seeing that happen allowed for me then to look back on it and say like, yeah, I definitely gave that my all, you know, despite all the circumstances, the conditions, the people, the whatever, just being out there every day, I think is half the battle.
September 6th through 10 were really quiet. Maybe 6 through 11 even were really, really, really quiet. Much more so than in years past. We caught more rain in August this year than we got in May, which is unreal.
Mind-blowing.
Never happened before. And that was because this Hurricane Hillary that showed up in the Pacific hit California, and then we got these weather bands that came north. And that affected a lot of the western states. What happened as a product of that was we had all this moisture. It was relatively cool. And then there was this tremendous fall green up. And I've been talking to all the old timers around here because I love doing that. And I ask them, like, have you ever seen this green in the fall? No one has.
No. It was like Serengeti level grass out there.
And that dispersed the animals so much. And I think it was very, very healthy for the animals to be dispersed. They're less vulnerable to hunters. They're less vulnerable to predators. They're getting better nutrition going into the winter. Like, it's all positive for the animals. From the hunting perspective, where I'd seen animals get concentrated in the past because this was the food or the water resource where typically there was not elsewhere, this year, like, they could go anywhere. So we were finding elk in places that we'd not previously found them. And then in the places that were money before, there were still elk there, but nowhere near the densities that I'd dealt with in the past.
That's a great way of putting it. I think that's what I'm talking about by that inconsistency where there just wasn't that, like, I've hunted this unit a lot and I've spent a lot of time working in it, and it just wasn't like, I found myself saying a lot like, there should be an elk right here. Like in any other year, this is like primo. And we just had to work harder for them, you know, and change the tactical approach a little bit. But I still think that consistency of effort, and I think I talked about on that other podcast, was just the taking more days for the actual hunt, if you can, than anything else. Like, pay yourself in time, right? And that sort of paid off. I ended up not killing a bull in that unit, called in a lot of elk. But it was the 14th of September this year that was like elk heaven. And the 15th, quiet. It was the strangest thing. Called in 4 different bulls on the 14th, and it was just like dark to dark, lights out, right? And then the next 3-4 days, it's quiet. The elk moved on. I found that they were moving at a greater clip than in years past. Just because I don't think there was that need to go from this bedding to this food, back to that bedding, back to that food. It was everywhere. Which was an interesting thing to kind of wrap your head around.
You know, another thing that happened is Oregon's season was a week later this year than it's ever been before.
In the history of the world.
And nobody had experience with it. A lot of people thought, well, this is going to be a great thing. I'm going to hunt the last week of the season. You know, the rut's going to be on more than ever. That was not the case.
No.
So after that first estrus kind of peaked and then valleyed, the elk got eerily quiet. And I was dealing with a lot heavier rut activity in the middle of October than I was at the end of September. So the second estrus hit really hard. The calves that I saw were mostly second estrus calves. So they're small calves. Those calves typically don't survive winter. I'm very concerned about that. The first estrus calves that were bigger, there was a lot fewer of them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I noticed that with deer too, like a pretty late fawn cycle around here.
So really interesting in that regard. Calves play a significant role in how a herd moves around. You know, I can stop a bull much easier with a calf sound than I can with a bugle or a cow call.
Why is that?
I think that it's because a cow won't leave a calf, and the bull knows that if a calf is getting left behind, that he's going to lose a cow too.
It's almost like the one in the hand, two in the bush thing. He's after the two in the bush.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think that the other thing too about this season that was interesting with regards to like calling and things like that is this is the least amount of calling I've ever done. Hands down. I mean, I was sitting still for a long time in the dark, early in the morning, just letting things occur as they would. I'm not sure the actual outcome of that, but I think it was better to do that than to be bugling and calling all over the place, because I just didn't have that. The herds were not talking like you could not sound normal doing that, right? So we talked about that. I think middle of the season I was on this giant bull and couldn't get in there. You know, it was like very quick in the morning, nothing in the evenings. And you were like, well, you just got to live with them in the dark. So I did that. I was out there at 2 a.m, just following them around and making their way, trying to beat them to their bed, and got really close doing that. I think that's a very underutilized tactic, right?
Yeah, it'll wear a guy out, but
yeah, you can't do it forever.
You can do that, and I've done it really effectively in the past where I've walked in the dark on these elk. And you can walk with an archery range of them.
Oh yeah.
And as long as you're playing the wind, usually the ground is a lot quieter then too, because there's more dew. So you can just walk right in on them. And if you can stay with them until it gets light, you've got that opportunity. So, hang back at 60 or 70 yards and try and stay with that elk. And he's going to be racing around. He's going to get farther. He's going to get closer. Like it's a high stakes tactic. But you can get in there and get close, and then in that first 2 minutes of shooting light, as soon as it's legal, like give him what you got.
Yeah.
And whether that's cow sounds, bugles, like raking, time of year is going to dictate that, and really what turns that bull on. But man, it can work.
Yeah.
But if you're going after a specific bull like you were, sometimes you've got to play the high stakes game.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was hunting this. I saw this bull on like the 7th or 8th. I actually glassed him up from a different vantage point. And so I biked into a zone early and got on that bull the first day, followed him around a little bit, played it pretty safe. And then once I saw him or laid eyes on him, I was like, no other elk matters. Like, this is the bull. If I'm going to kill him or nothing. Yeah. And I've never done that before, really. I've always shot the first bull that I could because it's archery hunting and you should. But I was okay with that, the potential outcome of that. And gosh, that's a fun game to play.
Yeah.
I really learned a lot from just hunting one bull. Like, you know what he sounds like, you know what he's going to do. You can kind of read him, but then he slips you.
Yeah.
Again and again and again. I found too in this unit that I'm hunting, there's a lot of cattle. And they're wild. They're rank.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't let you pass them.
Yeah.
They run, and the elk run. That was really tricky. That was one of the trickier things I've had to deal with. And I'm sure, having a good grass here, the folks are like, well, let's keep them out there. Right. Let's not bring them back now. That was a pain point for me, for sure. Because the unit is so flat that there's cows everywhere.
Yeah.
And you cannot kind of slice and dice your way through there to save your life.
Yeah.
Really hard. And I think the elk know it, man.
It's a super wolfy area too. And those cows, we're talking moo cows here, get really keyed up.
Yeah.
And
especially in the dark because they can't see you.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And when they take off, it's so dramatic.
It is.
They're very dramatic.
Yeah, that was tricky. I don't know if I really learned anything by that other than just kind of hating the sight of them after a while.
Yeah.
And I hate to use that as an excuse, right? But it was an impactful thing that occurred.
Yeah, I mean, it's a factor, and it's something that, people are going to have to deal with from time to time. It's part of the program.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if I, went over there and cut your arm right now, the blood would come out in whitetail shaped drops.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of who you are coming from the Midwest. And whitetail have very much been on your mind since moving back here to this area. What did you go into the season with for your plan for hunting whitetail bucks? And then how did reality sort of shift that around?
Yeah, certainly. I think just a little full disclosure, the reason I think I like whitetails is it's nostalgic for me, certainly. Yeah. And it's something that I feel like I got to do a lot of the last 4 years in a lot of different places. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing wherever you go, which I really like.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool thing. It's food, it's bedding, it's water, and it's a rut, right? Much like anywhere else. And so the other thing too is like I really want to get people around here to quit killing forked horn mule deer and 2-year-old mule deer. And there's such an ample opportunity to kill whitetails in lieu of that situation. I wanted to sort of prove a point in that, and like you can still have a really good experience, showcase that, and sort of change people's minds a little bit. So we went in to this season with a chunk of property that we leased from a good friend of ours, and with the intention of trying to go in there and kill some mature deer.
Yep.
And this is the first time and the last time I would have ever said this, but that the late start of our archery season this year was a tricky factor.
That made the archery buck hunting
real tough.
Almost impossible.
Yeah. And for folks that aren't, whitetail brained like myself, I think that they think it's just a buck standing in a field and you shoot them, but I think they're pretty wily. I think they're smart individuals. They're adaptable. And they're generally pretty nocturnal, right? So we were hunting a lot of food sources, setting up a lot of food source access, and then trying to edge into bedding because we could not get these deer to get diurnal at all, right? It's like 12 seconds in the morning, maybe, likely nothing in the morning, and maybe a little bit of time if you get a cold front in the afternoon. We didn't really have a whole lot of that in September. And those bucks were all velvet up until I think like 36 hours before the season opened. They went hard-horned, which is just such a gut punch when you work so hard and that deer's consistent. And then he's not.
So what happens when their antlers mineralize and, they rub that velvet off? How does that shift their behavior?
Yeah, so in my opinion, animals that have velvet don't like to touch a lot of stuff with that velvet. Yeah. I think it's uncomfortable, and it's almost like a fingernail that's reforming, so to speak. So once they shed that off, it's like, now I can go into the thick nasties, and I can live back in there. So the difference between a velvet buck and most velvet animals, I think, and non-velvet or hard-horned critters is they just seem like a little less scared of everything when they're in velvet. They're a little more bullish.
Yep.
And I don't know really the reasoning for that, biologically speaking, but it certainly throws a wrinkle in there when they transition to that hard-horned buck on the precipice of that hunt. Because our plan was to kill these bucks in velvet early, like opening day bucks, because it was field edge, food, whatever. We picked a bad lease in retrospect because the food source that they were coming to was minimal, I would say.
Yeah.
Minimal and not very nutritious, right? It wasn't alfalfa. It's hay ground. It's grass ground. So they had a lot of options other places, and I think that's probably what happened. As that food source sort of crisped up a little bit and dried up, they went somewhere else. And you know how it goes. You look at trail camera pictures for 4 months, and you pick the buck that you're going to target. At least that's what the whitetailers do often. It's like, this is my target buck. We didn't name them. I'm not into that. I think that's kind of ridiculous. But, so we went into that season with expectation trying to kill some bucks on the opener. Didn't happen. Sat that tree for the first week every evening and just had does, right? And I knew where he was living. He's living on the neighbors, bedding on the neighbors, and then transitioning from bedding to food across where we could hunt him, which is a tough thing because you can't edge in just far enough. So typically in a plan like that, if he goes hard-horned, I was going to take each day and observe and get 30 yards closer to his bed, right? So I could maybe get that 15 to 20 minute window when he stands up in the afternoon and kill him. But we ran out of ground essentially. And that's a tricky thing, right? Whitetail hunting is tricky that way, where if you don't have permission on that next piece, those bucks, they're not gonna come to you just because you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of tree stand setup we're using?
So I typically hunt out of a saddle because I'm only hunting small windows at a time. Mm-hmm. What I transitioned to this year is a Lone Wolf 0.5 tree stand, which is a really light setup. It's almost like a saddle platform. And then I would wear my saddle and use my saddle as my harness.
Okay.
So essentially you've got the best of both worlds.
Yep.
You got a light tree stand that's comfortable to sit down in, so you're not hanging there in your diaper, seems like, for hours. And I like to get super high in the tree too. I was hunting with Kino and it kind of freaked him out because I'm up there 25 feet if I can make it.
Which is very Midwest.
Yeah, it's become more Midwest, I think. For the longest time growing up, it was just a ladder stand, maybe 10, 15 feet off the ground if you're lucky, because they weren't very good and they were heavy.
Yep.
And now they're titanium forged and single piece construction. And with the saddles, as long as you got enough sticks and enough length, you can get as high as you want. The other thing too about getting too high is your angles start getting a little funky.
Yep.
Especially when they're right underneath you. It's kind of a strange angle to try to shoot something.
Yeah, that shoulder blade's in the way.
Yeah, and the difference though is I just shoot a heavy ass arrow with a giant broadhead.
It doesn't matter.
And it doesn't matter, right? But it does if you're shooting a mechanical and a 300 grain arrow. That'll just bounce off, or at least won't do the job.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I was using for a tree stand. And a lot of guys start to do that during the rut more in the Midwest. Because it offers them like I said, the best of both worlds, the ease of being able to actually sit down. I think anybody that says they could sit a saddle for a whole day sit is just lying.
Yeah.
Or they just can't feel their legs.
Yeah, a lot of pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So would you do anything different about your setup as far as the tree stand?
No. I think I was sitting in a lot of different trees.
Yeah.
I wasn't in one spot ever because often here we get what I would consider on like the weather apps a consistent wind, but that doesn't really occur here.
No.
We have a lot of topography,
Yep.
a lot of diurnal and nocturnal shifts with thermals, and just a lot of like where these bucks live is usually in like a hole somewhere, generally during their bedding period, and it's just so swirly. So I had to move a lot. I'd actually move within a hunt often if I couldn't get a consistent wind.
And because we've got all these mountains and canyons and things like that, our weather must be incredibly difficult to forecast because our forecasts are really only good for a few hours.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's forecast has, maybe a 70% probability of accuracy, 48, 36 hours. It's almost just like entertainment.
Yeah. That's a big thing in the whitetail world, right? Is like not sitting a spot more than you sit it. Because I firmly believe like the first sit in a spot is your best chance to kill that buck.
Yep.
After that, it just gets harder and harder. So I think moving around, and I'll give you an example. I had a hunt in Kansas a couple years ago where there's a permanent structure, tree stand in a spot that's a really good rut spot. And I sat it. I was on like a short timer hunt. I had like a half a day. I just sat it because I wasn't going to set up anything. And those bucks came over the ridge and looked at that tree, right? And if I would have picked 2 trees, 3 trees different, I would have killed that buck.
Yeah.
But they know. And I think especially when you're getting cameras out of there or doing whatever, like they know you're around. They're not unused to human scent. It's just, is it in the wrong spot for them? See, I moved around a lot.
And whatever hormonal shift occurs, we talk primarily about testosterone increasing at the same time that they're going to rub off their velvet. I'm sure that there's other hormones that are changing as well, and that probably increases their wariness during that time. And yeah, the deck definitely gets reshuffled when the bucks are still in velvet. Like they're on tracks. They keep a tight schedule. It's relatively easy to predict their movements, and if you saw him come through here yesterday, he's probably going to come through there again tomorrow at more or less the same time.
Yeah.
But as soon as that hormonal shift occurs, man, the game changes, and in really unpredictable ways.
Yeah, the closer you get to the rut, too, things shift a lot faster, I think. I do believe that if this place had a really, really good natural food source, there would have been a lot better chance of killing the bucks we identified as shooters.
Yeah.
Because it was so intermittent, those bucks were doing a big loop, I think. So it was very random when they would hit that sort of sub-adequate food source. But if it was like green alfalfa, where they didn't have to travel to go find other, I think we would have killed them out of there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so I ended up pulling the plug on that spot after that first week. just because I wanted to elk hunt and I had other things to do. But I did end up shooting a buck on a neighbor of ours' property, basically in the classic like early season hunting a field edge food situation, right?
Yep.
Where there's a large population of deer with a good food source, and shot him when he came out of his bed in the evening, and that was that.
Do you want to talk at all about your new business?
Sure. Yeah.
Tell me about it. What's it
Yeah.
called?
It doesn't really have a name. Celia keeps telling me I need to have a name and a logo, but I've been so busy working that I haven't done that.
I love that.
Yeah. I think I should probably do something though. But I just,
Yeah.
drop your name suggestions in the comments.
Yeah, there we go. Leave a review. Let's try and name Kevin's business.
Yeah, there you go. So basically what I'm doing, James, is I've worked in the outdoor industry for a long time. And at least it feels like a long time. I think in total days, it maybe is only like maybe half a decade, but it feels like 2 because of the time
right
that you give. So I've got a lot of experience in seeing businesses grow and build and shift through different ownership processes and things like that. So I've started a brand strategy company essentially that works with small to mid-size outdoor brands in specifically in the hunting space, to try to solve a few problems for them. One being brand strategy and sort of organizational development, like what is a good idea for your business based on what I know and what I can learn. I'm also really interested in, and I've helped brands on community development and really what that means in terms of partnership strategy, community efforts in terms of ambassadorships and things like that, and how that world has shifted from, foundationally speaking, classic sponsorships of a television show, for instance, all the way through influencer marketing, pushing product on Instagram, to experiential things that bring people to feel assimilated or sort of associated with your brand.
Yeah.
That shifts every day,
Right.
right? And if you don't have your finger on the pulse and you try to do it the same way you did yesterday, it's just dead.
Got to adapt.
Got to adapt or die. And I think that's becoming really relevant because everybody's doing it, right? The hunting industry is behind the rest of the world by, I don't know, a decade or so, probably, maybe less than that.
Yeah. 10,000 years in some regards.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, so the last part too is general business development strategy with small brands on making good decisions, in terms of product development and really looking at the whole picture. In some ways it's predictive, right? Because I'm trying to read the tea leaves, so to speak, to help these brands understand what's going to be next. But at the sort of the foundation of this whole business, it's really trying to make companies understand, and again, reiterating the importance of relationship-based business, right? That goes beyond transactional and really looks at like, how do we create long-standing relationships within community marketing, brand strategy, and business development that are going to move the needle. And it's been going pretty good so far, for sure.
Yeah. You're working with some great brands right now
Mm-hmm.
that have, just tremendous potential.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendous potential. And they're doing well. Like, I don't want to say, oh, you've got potential, like it's, the most improved award, in the junior high art program or whatever. Like, no, these are brands that are doing great, but man, they could do really, really well.
Yeah, I sort of like stop the conversation usually in these intro calls and intro meetings where people are concerned with things like ROI, KPIs, quarter to quarter growth. Right. I think those are all functions of good strategy.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't ever be the first words you utter, because you don't have a concept of what is actually going to be helpful. And that's my job, is to come in and say, let's refocus our attention and our energy towards building good foundations so those things occur and we can measure them naturally, versus coming out the gate for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Who are you working with now?
So I'm working with Argali Outdoors out of Boise. Makes a suite of products for the backcountry hunter.
Strong hand.
Brad Brooks has a strong hand.
Yeah,
I think
a strong handful.
strong handful. Yeah, remarkable guy who's built a business based on some incredible integrity, and the lack of corner cutting in what he does is something that's really attractive as a person that enjoys successful businesses. He just does it the right way.
Yeah. some things that I really appreciate about Brad, and I almost have a hard time separating Brad and Argali.
Yeah.
So if I'm
that's right.
talking about Brad, I'm talking about Argali. If I'm talking about Argali, I'm talking about Brad.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that he would be offended at me saying that, because I'm sure that there's times where it feels to him the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some things that I really appreciate, he'll accept any criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you are telling him that there's something wrong with something that he makes, he'll accept that joyfully,
Mm-hmm.
because you've just given him an opportunity to improve, and
Yep.
he accepts that. He's interested in the climb,
Mm-hmm.
in more ways than one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And knows that if you don't start strong, that you won't finish strong.
Right. Yeah. Everything that he conceptualizes is foundationally intact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something that he told me early on was that there was no detail too small.
Mm-hmm.
And I use his knives a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I wear one every day. I wear it on a lanyard around my neck, and I got one of them, and it was a little bit abrasive against my skin. Now, I don't think almost anybody else like wears this knife against their skin.
Yeah.
But I was like, hey, I think that this is just a little bit coarse, and probably more so than it needs to be for somebody's grip. And I've worked with enough companies now to know that it's really risky for me to say something like that, because a lot of people are offended by it, and then they get a bad taste in their mouth about you, and they think, well, he doesn't like my product, he doesn't like me.
Yeah, the conclusion they jump to is like, he's not on our team.
Right.
Yeah.
But Brad loved that feedback.
Yeah.
And no detail too small. Yeah, I mean, the tents have waterproof thread.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's changed. Even if the concept of what he builds is not intuitive to the customer based on years of marketing jargon, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And that's what's really inspiring as a marketer,
right?
To say like, no, we can change people's minds with this. And so what he's done is he's exited nylon from his tent material, which is brilliant, because nylon sags, it gets wet, it doesn't do well.
Yep.
So that poly stuff just holds its shape, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had, I don't know if I've talked about this on the show before or not, but I use Brad's tent, and I use a Kafaro teepee as well. Had them both out for a hunt earlier this spring. Got rained on as I was packing up that last morning, of course, classic. So that means I've got to dry everything out when I get back. That Argali tent dried out a day faster, right? And that's like a sub note. Like, who really cares?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
It helped me. That saved me time in the long run, and time is of infinite value to me.
Yeah.
So okay. And I know there's good stuff coming. There's good stuff out there.
Yeah.
We like Argali.
Yep.
Another one is Quiet Cat.
Yeah, Quiet Cat I'm doing some stuff for, which is an electric bicycle company. This is a hilarious come to fruition moment because I was just coming off of pedaling my ass on a regular bicycle, because that's what's legal in this unit I'm hunting.
Man-powered,
and I'm deep.
Yeah.
And there's a hill in front of me, and I hate the hill because it's a breeze on the way in, sucks on the way out.
Yep.
So I'm pedaling up this hill, and this guy just scoots by me, no problem getting up this hill, and just goes, "Hey, how's it going?" And keeps going. I was like, that was not a regular bicycle, or I'm a bitch, basically. And I get up there, and I'm like, this guy's using an e-bike. It says no e-bikes, right? It's a regulation.
Yeah.
So I was hemming and hawing. I talked to him. He didn't know they were illegal, so I walked him through it, gave him a chance to do the right thing. But I was mad because I had worked really hard,
right?
And I think everybody should have to do that,
yeah.
Or be on the level. So I'm kind of driving out of this place, just kind of curmudgeon-y and mad because somebody beat me back to the trailhead, and this email pops up on I have like a screen in my truck, and it pops up, and it's from Quiet Cat, which is an e-bike company. I'm like, this is just too soon, man. And the email says, "Hey, yada yada, we want to talk to you about doing some work with us." And I about just called him and be like, "No, I'm not doing it." But obviously, you got to take everything in, and I'm really excited about it too, because I think what they've done well is like Brad, they continue to push the envelope on a better thing.
Yeah.
Better product. They've got some issues just in terms of like trying to figure out the next steps, right? Which is a really exciting thing for me because the world's sort of the oyster, right? Let's try a bunch of stuff and try to strategize some good planning and get from there. And then, you know, they work with a lot of people that I've worked with in previous roles and ambassadors and things like that, which is great.
Yeah.
Then it's just like turning a key and we can do some good work together.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
Awesome. Yeah.
I haven't been around Quiet Cats hardly at all. I do, you know, I like motors.
Yeah.
All of them. I like them.
Yeah.
So yeah, things that were previously not motorized that are now, I'm into it. So I know that they've been innovative. I'm excited to see kind of where they're going to go next because they really have kind of been at the front of this game. And I also think about stuff from like adaptive elements. So if we can create a tool that allows somebody to have an experience that they couldn't have otherwise physically, I'm very interested in that.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in that. And I think that Quiet Cat is going to do that for a lot of people. That said, if it says that you can't use an e-bike, don't use an e-bike.
I know. It's pretty simple that way. And I think that frustration was just day 15 of pedaling my ass down the same road, you know?
Yeah.
On a bike that was going to break.
Yeah. Who else you got?
I'm also doing some work for GoHunt, which is a really interesting tech company out of Las Vegas that has some mapping technology, has a really interesting insider platform, which essentially allows people to just plan their hunts better, I think. And I don't think they get mad about me saying this, but there's certainly a distrust in their product from its launch to now, and they've corrected a lot of things. So my job there is helping tell customer stories of success, right?
Yeah.
To sort of just show like, yeah, we were there, but now we're here.
Right.
And that's been really exciting too, because they have a lot of energy at that company to do really well too.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunity, I think, especially in terms of like bridging the east-west gap and like understanding what it takes to come out west to hunt. They've got some lethal guys working for them that understand the components of how to kit yourself out, right? And so they have a lot of really good pieces of this puzzle.
Yeah, Brady's a killer. He needs to start using silencers, but he's a killer.
Yeah. He does hate them, doesn't he?
Dude, what's the deal with that?
I don't know. He likes the brake.
Uncivilized.
I know. I still don't have a can on any of my stuff, but I'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We shot 228 nozzlers today, one with a brake and mine with the silencer on it. And dude, when we shot that braked gun, like there's just like debris that you didn't know about flying around, and I couldn't stay in the spotting scope to observe shots.
No, it gives you a headache.
It's just awful.
Yeah.
It's just awful.
Yeah, I took the brake off my 300 Wid Mag.
Yeah.
And just shot it as is.
Yeah. If you're the one shooting the gun and you've got all the ear protection in the world, then shooting a muzzle brake is a relatively pleasant experience because it does knock a lot of recoil off, and you don't have to pay for a tax stamp, wait a long time.
Right.
You know, all the haranguing that you have to go through to get a silencer. But silencers do a phenomenal job of reducing recoil, reducing sound, just making the shooting experience that much more pleasant. And it's much less disruptive to wildlife. Yeah. And that's a big deal.
It is a big deal, especially in some of these units some of these seasons coming up where there's a lot of chaos going on.
We want to have a light hand on the land.
Yep.
So if we're scaring these animals less, that's more better.
Yeah, I like that.
I had Lorenzo on the podcast a couple years ago. So if folks want to know more about our Golly, Brad Brooks has been on the show before, so check out that episode. You want to know more about GoHunt, you can check out that episode I did with Lorenzo Sartini, one of the coolest names out there.
Yeah, it sounds like he should be like a race car driver.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, both of them are interesting people with interesting stories. And I think with GoHunt, you know, their product is pixels. They're selling pixels, and they can scale that in really interesting ways and be really dynamic in their movements and strategies, and they can adapt as quickly as the keystrokes allow.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Which is cool. Okay, greatest lesson learned so far during this hunting season, like the thing that you are definitely not going to do next year or that you're going to do differently next year. What is it?
Yeah, I like thinking in things in terms of like little sayings,
Mm.
and the old adage of sometimes an inch is a mile or whatever. I think sometimes a step is a mile.
Yeah.
Especially on the elk front, especially with quiet elk, like going into a situation with the level of patience, like you've got 17 days to get it done, even if you have 5 hours, like not taking that extra step, right? And like just allowing the situation to occur. I was pretty aggressive and I got beat a couple times that way. So yeah, I think sometimes just like knowing when to move, knowing when not to is a huge deal. And I think I'd like to try to employ that next year a little bit better. And I think honestly, the other thing about extending the day a little bit is not being afraid of the middle of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like staying there.
Yep.
Like, no matter if it's September 1st or September 30th, there's value in being in the woods, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's just finding a new turkey spot or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah. Way better than the rest of it.
So mine is, I love tracking so much. I'm obsessed with tracks. I look at everything as if it were a track.
Mm-hmm.
If I see an open spot in the forest, I want to think about whether there used to be a great big tree there.
Mm-hmm.
Like and animal tracks are so exciting to me. I often will spend too much time looking for tracks on the ground, and this year, and it's happened to me forever, but this year I really noticed that I would be in elk, I'd be hearing elk, I'd know where the elk were, and I would still end up looking at the tracks on the ground, and that causes me to not see those elk in time. And I busted animals a couple times this year because I had my head down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just because I'm addicted to seeing these impressions on the earth.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a time that I just have to break away from that and get my eyes up, change levels, get down underneath the limbs of the trees so that I can spot these elk quicker, so I'm not busting them, because you've ruined everything at that point.
Yeah, there's no going back.
You did everything right.
Yeah.
You got there. You got within visual range of the animal, and you let them see you before you saw them, and that costs you everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I would just have the discipline to peel my eyes off the ground and start burning through the trees and glassing more, I think that there's some opportunities out there that I've been missing because of that.
Yeah, interestingly, I've been watching my dog do that, right? Where she changes from a scenting dog to a visual dog. And it's a matter of, if we could smell like that, it'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But she knows when she should be smelling for birds and when she should be looking for birds.
Yeah.
Right. And that transition zone is like a hair thick.
Right. Right.
Really interesting.
Well, that's an hour, brother.
That's an hour.
I am excited for the rest of waterfowl season.
Oh boy, we're gonna shoot some birds.
Yeah, I've got a new blind coming.
I know.
New panel blind. I'm excited about that. I'm so disappointed in what happened to my layout blinds. Mice broke into.
Oh boy.
I have a shipping container full of decoys, and mice broke in there, and those layout blinds just smell awful. And I have them outside airing out right now, but even just walking past them about makes me want to gag.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to throw them away.
Time for some new ones.
Yeah. Disappointing. Freaking mice. But yeah, waterfowl, it's really starting to happen now. We've got lots of northern birds. I'm excited for that. And I'm excited for rifle bull hunting tomorrow.
Yeah. The transition from fur to feathers is upon us.
Yep. Good stuff.
Amen.
Feels natural. Last thing, if somebody is a business and they want to get a hold of you and enlist the services for your company that doesn't have a name, how do they do it?
Kevin Harlander at gmail.com or kevinharlander.com.
Okay.
Easy.
Easy peasy. All right. Thanks, man.
Yep.
Thank you all very much for listening. I'm going to keep bringing you these stories from normal people just like you who have done extraordinary things. Everyone is an expert at something, and they have interesting perspectives on life and work and the environment and all the things that we care about. I'm going to keep bringing that to you. And I want to thank you so much for making this show possible. I also want to thank Emily Bratcher for producing this show. She does a great job editing. Really appreciate her. I want to thank John Chatelain. He did the art for the Six Ranch podcast. And Celia, soon to be Harlander, she digitized that so that we can get it out there on the internet for you. Also want to thank Justin Hay for writing this original music and the beautiful whistling that you're listening to right now. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Please keep listening to the show. Write me a review if you feel like it, and just keep doing your thing, and we'll all learn from this together. It's been fun, and we're just getting started.